Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow commissioners. It is May 15th, and I'm calling the Measure J Oversight Commission meeting to order this evening at 5:30 p.m. Let's can you do a roll call, please?
Commissioner Cavaleros,
Present.
Commissioner Fedor,
Present.
Commissioner Isaac,
Present.
Commissioner Schoen,
Present.
Commissioner Thigpen,
Present.
Commissioner Wolford,
Present.
Commissioner Hopkins, Commissioner Kravitz,
Present.
Commissioner Newby,
Present.
Vice Chair Davis, Chair Sipkins.
Right. The next item on the agenda, is the pledge of allegiance. Please stand and please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the agenda, and I have a motion to accept the agenda as presented, please.
So moved.
There a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? If not, tonight's agenda has been accepted. Next item on the agenda is item number 5, that's the approval of the minutes of April 17, our last meeting. I hope all of you have had a chance to review that. Does anybody have any? Let's have a motion first to approve the minutes. There's a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes of April 17th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? If not, those minutes are accepted as prepared. Melissa, are there any public comments for this evening?
There is no public comment.
What?
If that's the first, I think that's the first meeting this year, when there's no public comment, and I mean, I don't have to speak on my. The next item on the agenda is welcome comments from the Measure J Chair. I have a few comments for this evening. I want to start off by noting that there is going to be one vacancy on this commission. And it is because one of our commissioners has turned out after 6 very helpful and fruitful years on this commission. So I want to publicly thank Commissioner Federer for the service that she has given, not only to this commission, but to the entire city. I hope you continue to stay in volunteer status and help the city out in any way that you can, because you have been extremely helpful in the past. So,
Very
thank you.
fun. I'm going to rest now. After being on Jeannie's Library Board for 6 years and coming here, that's 12 years in the city. That's enough. You retire, you guys retire after 12. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been fun.
Next item is, for my comments, is I want to remind you all of, the meeting that we have with the city council, the joint commission meeting and city council meeting at 5:30 p.m. on the evening of May 22nd, 1 week from tonight. I hope, as many of you can attend as possible. At that time, we will be discussing, both what we've done this past year and the budget that we're going to be looking at this evening. So it's going to be an interesting evening, and I hope you can all attend. I've been asked by a couple of commissioners to sort of preview a little bit of what I'm going to talk about in front of the city council next week. And of course, this is all subject to change and subject to what we talk about tonight in terms of the biennial budget that's coming up. But I am going to talk a little bit about how hard we all worked during the past year. That there were 52 applications for community initiated projects, totaling somewhere north of $18 million in requests. We had a $6 million budget, so we could only approve about a third of what was requested. We worked very hard using the standards that we added in front of us that had been set both by the city ordinance and by the committee that created the application. I think that although the 21 projects that we ultimately recommended funding on, those applications total almost exactly what our budget, $6 million was, just a little bit short. So it was a lot of work by a lot of us on the commission. I want to thank staff and I want to thank the commission for what we did, and I'm going to thank you all again in front of the city council next week. But I am going to bring up, and I'm glad that Councilmember Bernstein was here because I'm going to parrot next week some of the things that he said 4 years ago when he was sitting not on the city council, but as the chair of Measure J. And that is sort of three philosophical questions that I'm going to raise. And they've been raised by the chairs before me in the past. One is that when Measure J was initially approved by the voters and became law in 2011 or 2012, the amount of funds brought in by Measure J by the tax was about $7 million. And $1 million of that amount was devoted to community initiated projects. We are now 13 or 14 years past that. The amount of revenue brought in by Measure J tax has tripled to somewhere in the vicinity of 20 or $21 million. And yet the budget for next year still allows, as proposed, as you're going to hear later tonight from Director Mooney, only $1 million set aside for community initiated projects. And we're going to have to decide tonight whether or not we think that's a sufficient amount. And we're going to have to then present our views to the city council next week. In addition, both my predecessors, now City Council Member Soto and City Council Member Bernstein, both raised in their comments to the City Council at the joint meetings that they had, that there was a lack of communication between the City Council and this commission, and that the commission had been required to make recommendations on funding without a clear definition or direction from the City Council about what the city's priorities were. And both city councils that they addressed promised to develop new lines of communication on a regular basis by either having a city council member attend some or all, or just merely a fraction of our meetings, or have some kind of a communication liaison between the chair and the vice chair of this commission and city council. And despite the thoughts at the time expressed by the then city council members, I do not believe that any of that came to fruition this past year. And therefore we had to make decisions as a council or a commission rather, with respect to the 51 applications that we ultimately had to consider without knowing exactly what the priorities were. And the city made clear what those were in April, at which time we'd already finished all of our recommendations. So I'm gonna, once again, like my predecessor did, suggest to the city council next week that there be better communications between the council and this commission going forward in the future. And then finally, another point that's been brought up, I think, by both my predecessors, I've reviewed both the video tapes of their presentations numerous times, is that community initiated projects and Measure J itself represent a special tax to not just visitors to the city of Palm Springs, but to residents here as well. And it's important for the residents of the city, in my opinion, to know where the dollars, the special tax dollars collected from our residents go. But there's really no communication program. There's no public relations effort by the city or by this commission to make certain that the community knows exactly where the money is being spent. Like, you know, our applications require that the applicant agree that we can post a sign on the project that says this project has been funded in whole or in part as a result of Measure J funds. a large portion of our money, both this year and in the future, goes, for example, to Joe Montalvo, and $9 million hopefully will go to roads. And yet, when I asked five citizens, this is hardly scientific, but I asked five citizens at large, what do you think about the roads in Palm Springs? I know it's the number one issue in their minds. The road condition is not good here in Palm Springs. Please have it fixed. I said, do you know that $9 million goes every year to fix the roads from Measure J? They said, no, that comes out of the regular budget, comes out of the general fund, doesn't it? I said, no, there are, to my knowledge, no signs up on any of the projects, the road projects that Joe does. And I'd like to have Joe direct it in the future, and I think he does a great job, I'm not being critical. But I would love to have the city know that a large portion of the roads that are being repaired in the city are being repaired with Measure J funds. So those are sort of the philosophical comments that I'm gonna be making to the council next week. I'm previewing it now for Councilmember Bernstein, and he's gonna be prepared to defend the council and to come back with the counter proposals from there, but.
Do it today.
That is, those are these, sort of the outline of what I'm gonna be talking about, next week. As well as supporting to the extent we can support the budget that has been going to be submitted, by Director Mooney to the council with respect to the Measure J funds next year. So with that, let's move on to the new business, which is the Measure J biennial budget. And so Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Siblings, I appreciate that. So tonight is all about budget. So we've got two agenda items, but it's really about budget. We want to get the commission to have consensus on the budget that will be recommended to the city council for approval on the May 22nd meeting. Ultimately, the council will approve the entire budget likely at the end of June. They can recommend any changes at the 22nd meeting to the Measure J budget that they desire. We'll take the direction and we'll do whatever the direction they give to staff. So with that, I do want to talk a little bit about the process. Chair Simpkins went over it well for the night of the 22nd. It'll be the commission members, as many as we can get up on the dais, will be sitting on the chairs where city staff usually sits. Council will of course sit in their regular chair, so you guys will have a good discussion. Be able to hear everything clearly. Chair Simpkins will give a presentation to the council, talk about the budget and present the numbers to the city council. And then they'll open it up for discussion, just like a normal agenda item would be at city council. Of course, I'll be there for any questions if needed. City Engineer Joe Montalvo will be there for questions. Public Works Director David McAbee and his project manager Aaron will be there for project questions. And then also Nick Gonzalez, Director of Parks. I think he may be out that night, but he'll have a representative from Parks there to be able to answer questions. So we'll all be there to be able to help out the commission. And if needed, if the council has questions that the commission can't answer, we'll all be there to help out. And with that, we'll go ahead and dig into the budget. So we'll look at the very first page. There's a lot of columns on here. I did that on purpose. It's to show just history and to give a good education to the commission about what's happened in the past. The first gray column, the fourth column over, that is the year-to-date numbers. I'm not going to go over those because not much has changed. I will talk about sales tax in just a minute. The full year forecast we'll go over that as first in detail. That's the first blue column. And then the two orange column is the budgets that the council or the commission will recommend to the council to approve. Of course, those numbers are subject to change with whatever happens tonight in the commission's discussion. Those changes will be incorporated tomorrow and put in the staff report that will be posted to the agenda for the 22nd meeting on Monday evening. That's our target date. And we think we're pretty comfortable about getting the staff report posted. So once the staff report is posted, we'll let all the commissioners know. You can go out there and look at the staff report. It's gonna be no new news to the commission. It'll all be what we talk about here tonight. So it's not gonna include anything you haven't already heard. The green columns are forecasted columns. It's sort of to give you some context about the future, about some of the debt issuance that's gonna occur for the Measure J funding. And just an outlook into the future to give some context to the current year budget. Okay, with that, let's talk about sales tax and then we'll come back to this first page. The sales tax numbers are on the very last page. And it's the same format that we presented. It'll look just like what Melissa has on the screen. If you recall last month, I'll let it give everybody a chance to get there. I'll flip them through all the pages. If you recall last month, we ended the month at with sales tax was greater than the prior year by 1.5%. When sales tax came in April for the sales month of February, we're down a little bit. And I'll explain that in just a minute. Year to date, we're down 2%. This year, the numbers do not include the contribution that the tribe collects for the food and beverage they collect on their land for non-tribal owners on their land. We must have got it a little bit early last year, so we included it in our number, and we'll get their number, and it'll be in actually next month's number. So we're not really down quite as much as it looks here. That number is in the vicinity of a couple $300,000. So once we get that number in, I anticipate that we'll either be flat to again a small growth when we add their number in to this next year, next month. So still good news on the sales tax front. Anytime we can get last year's number or greater these days, it's really good. So we're looking forward. We think we're still on track to meet the budget at 21.5 million, which would exceed last year's number by just a little bit. Does anybody have any questions on sales tax?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Chris. Have you had any discussions with the hotel industry or with other merchants in town about what their experience has been since April with respect to sales tax collections?
Not recently, as of a couple of months ago, they were looking into March and April or February and March as being stronger than last year. And April and May were to be a little bit lighter. So we'll see what those numbers look like when they actually come in. But we haven't really touched base with them anytime in the last month.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back to the first page. We'll go to the blue column. And I want to start out with the sales tax is budgeted at $21.5 million. So we've kept that number intact all year long. We think we're going to hit that. You just saw the numbers, so we think we're going to be close, if not exceed that number by the end of the year. We're hopeful for that. The next line down is our interest income at 1.2 million. You can see we originally budgeted that at about 250,000, so we're well over what we budgeted. And you can see in the budget for the next 2 years, we made that 750,000. The city's portfolio is just pretty strong still. We're earning 4 to 4.5% on the entire portfolio as a whole, and that's trimming down to all the funds that actually get interest. Measure J has a heavy cash balance right now, so they get quite a bit of interest income on that heavy cash balance. And so we're anticipating $1.2 million of total interest income, and that's really helpful to the bottom line, as you'll see when we get there. So total revenue is at 22.7 million. In the forecast, we've got a budget for street repairs at 6.6 million. That number is actually a little bit lower. The contract was just approved not too long ago. This is the annual paving that's led by Joel's team. The contract will include about $6.2 million of Measure J money, And we also are gonna have Measure A contribute to that pot about 1.7. So total street maintenance is gonna be 8 million, of which 6.2 is funded by Measure J. And the budget for community initiated projects, 6 million, of course, you all know that number really well. As you almost hit exactly 6 million when you approved all the community initiated projects. And then the number of 500,000, that's the reserve that we set aside, we're required to set aside. From a mandate by the FAA back in 2017. That requires the city to set aside all sales tax on aviation fuel. Has to go to airport projects. We're estimating that at 500,000. That's what it's been for the past couple of years. And we think that's gonna hold true this year. One line item down, if you go to the 3.13 million, that is the debt service. Debt service means repaying principal and interest on the debt that was the original downtown revitalization debt issuance. That debt issuance back in 2012 was about $33.5 million. We paid $3.1 million annually. The debt is exhausted in 2034. So we have a few years left to pay. The principal balance at the end of this year will be around $23 million. And one more down, the $400,000 as you go down that column, that's for downtown maintenance, landscaping and security. So that's security downtown at the garages, some landscaping work, downtown parks. And then for some of the maintenance that happens downtown. And the commission a couple years ago, when the last biennial budget was approved, the commission felt that the funding of Measure J should be more for infrastructure purposes and not maintenance, so we excluded that from the budget in the next 2 years. The project spend at $9.5 million, we'll go to that in a little more detail when we get to the second page, but that's all of the spend on all of the projects to date. And then these next two numbers are really large numbers. If you look at the very first number in our blue box, at that 43.5 million, that is a number, that's actually the approximate fund balance of the fund today. So what that means is we've carried over a lot of budget from prior projects. The library is a good example. We'll see in the next page that we have about $8.5 million of funds dedicated to the library, almost 9 million, that we've carried over for a few years now. So that's kind of what that fund balance means. We've got budget for prior approved projects that has not been used, that will be used in the future. And so we continue to carry that budget over. So if you look at these next two numbers, the $2.2 million, that's community initiated project funds that have been unused and carried over from the prior years. The next number, the 31.2 million, that's all the other projects. So all the projects you see on the project list on the next page, that's totals $30+ million. And those budgets have been carried over from prior years. And you'll see when we get to the projects on the next page, you'll see and talk about them, you'll see that we're beginning to make a lot of movement on a lot of those projects. The library is getting ready to get started. So that 8.5 million to be used up in the next couple of years. And so on, as we get to the other projects, we're going to be making a lot of progress on a lot and completing a lot of those over the next 2 years. And then the forecast, earlier this year, we had some marketing and communications left over related from when we took Measure J to the voters to remove the sunset clause. And so we just had a little bit of marketing around that. That's what that 22,000 is for. Does anybody have any questions on the full year forecast numbers?
Chris, just one question. If with the carryovers for the CIP projects, if we've given an applicant money via the city council, is there a time limit that they have? Like, if they haven't come to you within 12 months saying they've started the project, does the contract say we get the money back?
That's a great question. I don't know if we had that language in the application or not. Do you remember? I don't remember. Let's get back to you on that.
Next time.
Yeah, next time. We'll get back to you on that. I don't recall.
I have a similar question, Chris. Sorry for interrupting. assume hypothetically that we have funded a project for $300,000. And ultimately Joel looks at it and says, there's no way I can do this for $300,000. It's a $500,000 project. So does that then come back to the commission for us to review and decide if we want to give an extra $200,000 to that project? And if not, what happens to the $300,000 that we've already suggested be approved?
So when the commission, when the city council actually approved the appropriation for community initiative projects, we approved the $6 million in spend and a $1.2 million bucket for cost or for project overruns. So if a budget came in, we would bring that overage back to the council and, or back to the commission to see if money's already been appropriated by the city council. So if the commission wanted to use that money, we could use it for overage. And we would assign part of that 1.2 million to that project. And that's, you know, if we wanted it to move forward. But we would bring that information back to you and then we would account for it in our overage bucket.
And if we decided at that time that we did not want to fund the project at using money from the overage, $1.2 million.
That would possibly have to go back to the city council since they're gonna approve this $6 million appropriation, but we would make that recommendation back to the council. If they chose to take the commission's recommendation, then we would drop that project. The funding would go back into the community initiative project bucket. Go ahead, Jack.
I guess this is more of an opinion, asking your opinion.
Mhm.
In the community initiated projects, do we provide enough information to the applicants as to what it really entails, especially when they have to look at prevailing wage and those sorts of costs that are more than what their next door contractor might tell them?
The agreement.
Yeah. So there's an agreement that we'll have with each organization that's funded. For each organization that's funded, it'll either be a grant, which a commissioner, I think we agreed a commissioner would oversee those dollars to ensure that the dollars are used appropriately and properly. So that's something that the commissioner assigned to that project would do. Of course, if it's a city staff project, then we would follow all city staff rules when completing the project, which would include everything you said.
Well, I'm going back, at the time they even consider bringing the project to the commission for review, are we providing them sufficient information upon which to make an application that isn't gonna end up several $100,000 short?
But we hope they were accurate in their information that they gave us. We made those instructions very clear to the applicant when we asked them for the numbers. And you know, and I think we even rejected a few applications because they didn't provide enough information. So I you know, I feel we're clear to the applicant. We did get some good applications that, you know, had actual invoices and bids associated with them. So yeah, I'm sure we're gonna have projects that are gonna be different than what the applicant had in their application, and we'll deal with those on a one-on-one, case-by-case basis.
And I think we went back sometime in November or December and decided that there was upwards of 30 applicants who had not provided sufficient information. And asked them to do supplemental submissions, which many of them did. But times have changed significantly since last November and December. And in terms of tariffs and other construction costs, and since many of those are 5, 6, 7 months old, I suspect many of them have been underpriced.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Joel, I won't speak for him. I think he'll tell you the exact same thing, that we're gonna encounter those cost increases.
Yeah. There's not much more to say, right? It is true. Every single project that being bid, the prices change, right? And yes, those folks that submitted those applications 4 months ago, the numbers are gonna be different. But it's gonna be up to them to come back to the commission and say, well, I need more money to complete, you know, whatever I requested. And then we'll evaluate those at that time.
But yeah, I suspect that, yeah, the numbers are pretty even.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment about visiting projects. You know, my feeling about that. We are responsible for where that money goes. It doesn't mean we boss the project. It doesn't mean we interfere with the project. But to go and see the project. Reading it on paper for me is very different than when I talk to you about what's your project. And I think after we award money, we've talked about this, Chris, but I don't think you've ever made it a policy or a decision. I really feel you should go out and see how it's going. Again, you don't have anything to say how it's going, but you can come back to our commission and say, the money is being spent, project's moving along. And with recent problems in the city, I think we need to be as transparent as we possibly can. And when you put eyes on it, you know what's going on. That's my personal feeling. And that's what I've done as a commission member. You go look at it. Oh, now I know what you're talking about. And so I really recommend that the commission make that part of the work that you do here.
Thank you. Any other comments on the forecast before we move on to the budget?
I'm sorry, just one question about when these applicants come forward, when they're working on their projects. What do they have to provide to you to actually get a check from finance issued to them?
Yeah, so the city put in some new policies and procedures regarding small grants and sponsorships, which carries over to any type of grant that the city would issue to an organization, which include all the Measure J grants. So there's a series of checks that we do, such as are you current with all of your state certifications? And so that's there's 2 or 3 organizations with or certifications with the state that a nonprofit organization or in general has to be clear on. We want them to be clear with the city. Are they, you know, if it's do they have a current business license if they need one? Do they owe the city any funds for anything? Do they have any other issues with the city? So we go through a series of 4, 5, or 6 checks to make sure that they all are clear. If an organization is not current with the state, we will make them current before we give them their grant funds. They have to continue to be current through all the certifications that they have to get. Once we are clear that they are in good standing with the city, that they're in good standing with the state, then we'll proceed with getting an agreement together with each organization. And the agreement will be signed by the city and by the organization, and we'll proceed to issue them a check if it's agreed.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, good questions, all good questions. Let's move on to the orange columns. This is the budget. So when we're talking about the budget, I'm going to go through these 2 orange columns and we're going to talk about each number and what each number represents. I then am going to go to the second page and we're going to talk in great detail about all of the projects. And I encourage all of the commissioners to ask questions of Joelle or David or Nick. Encourage you to ask all kinds of questions. We want you to be informative because this is your budget. So you are responsible for knowing the budget and knowing it as well as you can know it. Of course, with our help. So we encourage you to ask questions about current projects that have been previously approved, about new projects that will go forward, about new numbers in here, like the design numbers that we have. So we want the commission to be very involved, have a good discussion. We have plenty of time. If we have to go to 9 o'clock, Melissa said we could. Oh, sorry. But we have plenty of time to talk about the budget in great detail, so I encourage the commission to do that. Okay, so starting with the revenue number, sales tax number, that first number in the first orange column, $21.8 million. So we're only expecting a small amount of growth, 1% to 1.5%. It's a conservative estimate. It's intentionally conservative. We have an economy that's uncertain, and you know there's all kinds of opinions about where we're headed. So we don't want to get too aggressive, but I do want to show a little bit of growth. Want to show some positivity as much as we can without getting too ahead of ourselves and too aggressive. So I feel it's a good number. And if you look at the 27 number of 22.1 million, that also is a percent to a percent and a half increase. So we're a little bit conservative intentionally. And we'll probably do the same thing as we look at sales tax across the city as a whole. So on the investment income, $750,000 in each column. The city's taking on a lot of projects right now. Joel can tell you, we've got big road and bridge projects that cost a lot of money. We've got all these projects in the Measure J fund that we're gonna be funding, and we've got all kinds of public works projects that we're funding. So projects all over the city are happening and they're in progress. And they are, so we're spending a lot of cash. Our check runs as a city have gone from $3 to $4 million now to be consistent $7 or $8 million. So that means we are starting to spend money on a lot of our projects, a lot of our capital needs. As we spend that cash, our portfolio of cash reduces, our investments reduce. So right now, our total city portfolio is around $450 or $460 million. We expect that to decrease over the next 2 years as we complete a lot of these projects. So our return will still be consistent at 4 and 4.5%. A lot of the maturity of our investments are past 2 years from now. So the investments that are earning 4 to 5% right now will continue to do that over the next 2 years, but we'll have a reduced cash balance. So we'll have a reduction of our interest income as a city as a whole. So we're showing Measure J down to 750. That's probably conservative, to be honest. We probably will get a little more than that, but we do expect investment income as a whole to be down. And so total revenue in the first year is 22.57 million. I'll talk about 27's total revenue here in a minute, because it includes a number of 11.5 million, and we'll get to that in just a little bit when I talk about 27. Going down the first column, as you can see, the paving budget. There are some changes from the last time we got together. We reduced the paving budget from 9 million to 8.5 million. We still feel very comfortable with that number. We still feel very, very comfortable with that number. You know, the last year, I think our contract was 8.7 for total paving. We had some credits that came in, so it ended up being about 8.2 million. This contract this year is about 8 million. So I still think I'm being kind to Joel by giving 8.5 or recommending 8.5 million. So again, as Chair Simpkins stated, if you go one column or one row down to the $1 million for community initiated projects, that's what we are recommending as staff to set aside. Of course, the commission can choose otherwise. And then the $500,000 that we are reserving for airport projects, that will remain $500,000 until we see estimates that come in to reduce that number or increase that number. Going down to the next column, 3.1, again, this is the downtown revitalization debt we're paying back, expires in 2034. So in our long forecast, you see it going on at 3.1 million for the next several years. And then we get down to some changes that were made since we last talked about the budget. We're going to talk a little bit about design work that we have for number one, fire station number one. So we are going to begin design work on that pretty soon. We're looking at about $3 million. That's an estimate, of course. We think the project's going to be somewhere in the vicinity of 25 to 30 million in that area. So 10% of construction costs are what we typically set aside for design work. When we issue the debt for the fire station in a couple of years from now, we will take the proceeds and pay back Measure J for any design costs. So Measure J is only out the cash up front. They'll eventually get those dollars back to be used elsewhere. And that's going to be the same for any design work that we're going to propose in budget.
Is that the downtown fire station?
Yes, it is. Fire station number one downtown.
How old is that?
How old is that station? I don't know. It's old.
Pardon?
How many?
70.
70.
1970?
70 years. 70 years.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All
So
right.
that work, we're excited about that. We've talked about that quite a bit in the past as a priority project for the city. And we've talked about it to the commission as a priority project. So that one probably doesn't surprise you to see in the budget as something that we want Measure J to support in the future. If you go down to
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
what's that?
Question.
Yeah, sure.
So. $3 million is what you're recommending for design.
It's an estimate.
And then the comment that you made that. Once the debt is issued, the 3 million would be paid back.
Mhm.
What if the design comes in at 4 million?
It'll all be paid back. So what we'll do when we take we get an architect on board for design. We do an RFP, we get bids back. They give us a number of what it costs. Let's say it is $4 million. At the time we take that RFP to the city council for approval, we will introduce what we call a reimbursement resolution at the same time. That reimbursement resolution allows us to use debt proceeds to pay for the design. So when we introduce the reimbursement resolution at the same time that we are asking city council to approve the bid, we'll have an exact number, and that number will be repaid.
With respect to that, I have another question, I guess. It strikes me that what we're essentially doing is asking Measure J's funds to be used as if they were a bank. In a sense, lending the money to the city out of Measure J funds with the expectation of getting it back some time in the future. What if the bond market changes and they can't fund the fire station? What if it can't be built for what the expectation is? What happens to the money in that case? And second question is, are you aware of any instance in the past where Measure J has fronted money for design with the expectation of getting it back in the future?
The second question first, I don't know what happened with the downtown revitalization, if Measure J paid for it, or if it was refunded. I don't know in that particular case. That's the only project that Measure J supports the debt on. So that would be the project to be modeled, or to answer your question. I don't know the answer to that. We could come back with that information for sure. The first question on what happens if we don't issue debt. Well, if we don't issue debt and we don't receive the proceeds, Measure J doesn't get paid back.
Yeah, so I didn't want to say that in order to issue debt, the design would be 100% complete. We would actually go out to bid, the numbers would come in, we know exactly what the cost is of the project, and then the debt would be issued. Then we'd go out to the bond market and get the money for exactly that. So we would know, we have the ability to reject those bids if we're unable to bond.
Councilman Bernstein, if you can come up and provide some clarity.
Subject matter expert.
It's okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So, part of the process that you're talking about is going to be what we're gonna be focusing on next year, is monitoring all these projects. And you spend most of this year on a community initiated, next year, most of what it's gonna be is monitoring all these larger projects that are happening. In terms of, Measure J has funded designs for things that never happened, and that money was lost, basically. I mean, the designs still exist. So Measure J funded the roundabout for South Palm Canyon, and that was canceled. That still exists. If it comes in and we say the design is $3 million and next year we come back and it's gonna be 4 million, this is for the commission to discuss how they wanna reallocate funds throughout the year. And this will happen with their community projects as well. If they come back and say there's more money, you have the option of saying you want to put more money out of Measure J. You have the option of going back to the organization, say you have to find your own fundraising for this. Or if it's a city initiated project, you can say, we want to take it out of next year, we want to cancel the project. So this is the process that will go, and as Commissioner Federer said, you'll be monitoring all these throughout the year to see how they happen. So that's part of this process and this commission. You've had sort of a unique year this year where it's been almost solely focused on community initiated projects. But going forward, since you probably won't, I mean, I don't know, but usually we haven't done calls for applications every single year. So next year you'll have more time to focus on the community initiated projects you've approved to see where they come in, as well as the city's budget to see where each of these things are happening, because almost every line item in this will start to change over time, obviously including revenue. So that's what this commission, where you'll be actively involved, and this is what council is counting on for all of you to be doing over next year. You'll also see this year, we've gotten to an unusual point where we have several, as Chris Mooney said, very large projects happening over the next few years. So a lot of the money is being focused on a few projects. And part of your role will be to see or monitor how all of those are happening over time. So hopefully that answers some of the questions.
Thank you. Yeah.
So
Thank you, Councilmember Bernstein. That's awesome. Glad to see you here and lending your experience. I appreciate that.
So I'm gonna mention one more thing. You have the option, which was done in the past, and you can see in the marketing, that wasn't all just for the promotion of the Measure J sunset. There has in the past been marketing funds for communications and marketing of Measure J. That's an option that you have to recommend as well. For signs, for banners, for placards, for things like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I did take that out of the budget, but for no apparent reason, but because I could. But now apparently I should have left it in.
I'm just saying that, yeah.
So yeah, that's commission's option to add anything back into the budget, make all changes. That's what I want to have as discussion tonight, is to be able to do anything the commission would like to recommend to the council, just like the marketing and promotion of projects.
Thank you, Councilmember Bernstein. Appreciate it.
We'll move on down the line. So we talked about the fire station #1 design. And then the next item is design for the convention center and what we're calling convention center connectors. So these are big dollars. These design numbers have come from a consultant that the city has hired to work with us on the convention center design. A little background on the convention center, and when we get done with these two columns, I'd like to have Councilman Bernstein talk a little bit about the convention center project. Wayne Olson, our Director of Economic Development, is here. I'd like for him to make a few comments on the convention center project. It is an important project for the city. We have stakeholder meetings every month with members of the community. A couple of council members, including Councilmember Bernstein and the mayor, are there at every meeting to give direction. It's an important project and a priority project for the city. And we are allocating in this 2-year budget $7.5 million for design. And then, of course, you can see in the third year, there's another $2.5 million, and that's for a total of $10 million of design. This was the early numbers that were given to us by the consultant, looking at all the construction involved with the convention center and all the improvements that the city would like to do. Same instance that in this case as the fire station, when we issue debt, those debt proceeds will come back to the city. We will reimburse Measure J for the cash that they put out. And then project spend, the $7.7 million, we'll get into the projects in detail. That's all the newly budgeted dollars for either existing projects or new projects that have been recommended by Joel's team or David's team. And then we have $500,000 for project overages. This is just the existing projects. This is not related to the $1.2 million in overages we've allocated for community initiated projects. This is $500,000 for all the other projects that we have on the list. That if we incur an overage, it'll be up to the commission to decide if they want to allocate those dollars. So as we get down, we do incur a little bit of a deficit, but there's plenty of fund balance there to absorb it in fiscal year 26. We'll move on to the next line and we'll go down to revenue. We did talk about the sales tax in fiscal year 27, talked about the income, and then there's that $11.5 million number. What that is that's all the cash for the design work coming back to the city. So we anticipate that could happen in 27, that we could receive everything that we have put out in fiscal year 27. And remember, fiscal year 27 ends on June 30 of 27. So we go all the way into that part, and we think that most of the design work will be completed for all the projects we want to do design work for. And we feel that most of the debt will be issued by that time for all, or we're hopeful that most of the debt or some of the debt will be issued to be able to reimburse the Measure J fund back with the cash.
I feel like I'm asking all the questions, and well,
Go ahead.
traditionally, how long after the design work has been approved does the city issue the debt to do the project?
Once the design work is completed, and then we use that design to go out to bid for the construction. Once we have the number back for construction, then we issue it at that time. So, once the design work takes 6 to 10 months depending on the project.
Yeah.
And then we go out for bid for construction. And then, so in order to issue the debt, we want to have a real number in order to give our underwriters and our rating agencies an accurate number to bid. You don't want to over bond, you don't want to under bond. So we use those construction bids that we're going to award to the contractor as the basis for issuing debt. So it doesn't take long after design is complete. It takes roughly a couple of months, and then we issue debt and get the proceeds.
Question. Well, Chris, so the 11.5 million would be projected to come back in 26, 27.
Mhm.
Okay. Yet we show continuing to spend when we go further down there, 5 million and 1 million, 6 million.
Right.
And so we'd probably get it back at the end of FY 27 is, I think, what you're saying.
Mhm.
Okay. What I am wondering about, you got money in here in 27, 28, continuing to spend for debts or design for the fire station and convention center. And after that, what is that?
So that is part of the design work, but I failed to put that in my forecasted revenue. That is anticipated to come back to the city. The two, you're talking about the 2.5 and 1.5 and 28 in the first green column? Yeah, so that's part of the design work. We do anticipate when we issue debt that'll come back as well. So right now in the forecast, I just have the 2-year budget, that 11.5 million that we are going to put out in design work. And I do have that coming back in the 2-year budget, but there will be further design costs in the 3rd year that will also use debt proceeds to come back to the city. So what's happening in the convention center side is it looks like there's going to be at least 2 issuances of debt of preliminary. So we'll get one issuance and we'll get the proceeds back. We'll pay Measure back for design, and then somewhere down the road, we'll do a second one and pay Measure J back for that design work. Of course, all very preliminary, very early. So just to keep that in mind, this is just a budget and a forecast, and these numbers could change.
Okay, so if I, just to clarify. Let's take the debt service design on the convention center, the column with $3 million, or the yellow column with $3 million.
Mhm.
And then we have more debt service design for the fire station going out in 29, 30, and 31 of 2 point.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Commissioner Isaac, but this column for the fire station is also to pay back debt service, not just design. So when you get further out into those years of 28, 29, 30, 31, that's actual payments on, that's debt service payments.
Okay,
On the
so
fire
you want to use Measure J money for the debt service.
Yeah, and I think we've made that very clear in the past. I mean, this was a project we've talked about for a long time now. And if it hasn't been made clear, then I apologize. We talked about it quite a bit as Measure J funding the debt service.
Is that new?
That is not new.
No, it's not new, but so in effect. The
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 intention,
money that we would approve for design really isn't coming back.
well, it'll come back, but you also have debt service to pay
Then
in the
you pay it
future.
out in debt service.
Well, it's the intention for all of these projects that we require to design, that Measure J will be used to fund the debt service in some fashion.
Right, right, understand. But I just want, when we say the money's coming back to Measure J, it's really not coming back to Measure J. The way I see it.
So the cash is,
If you can look at the fund balance for Measure J, you'll see that's how you can see where it really is coming back.
Right,
And so you'll have a large fund balance and then you will continue to pay the debt. The debt balance will go out just like the downtown one, which.
Right, right,
Over time.
right. Yeah.
We'll mention that in past, we often were setting aside money to fully fund these projects. We did that with the library and the fire station. It then became determined that it was much better to do bond financing so that you could, because by the time we set aside all the money, it'd be 10 times the price. So that was the cost of that.
anybody,
How much does the convention center bring in every year?
how much is a what?
The convention center
Yeah.
bring in?
Going on to that, yeah.
Mhm.
Do you want to go through your budget first?
Yeah, let's go through the budget. We'll talk, let's go through the budget, then we'll talk about the convention center, because I think it's gonna need a little bit of discussion, yeah. So, okay. Going down the list again, the 5.2, we'll get to the project spend in a little bit, and then again, we got $500,000 for project overages. So, this is the high level 2-year budget. We'll have plenty of discussion here, talking about projects, talking about convention center. And then the commission, we can discuss any changes that are made, with that. So I think what we'll do here is we'll pivot a little bit, unless does anybody have any questions on sort of the high level budget?
I have one quick question, sending out, first of all, thank you for sending the letter of May 9th out to the commission in which you explained all of this. It aren't all of us, I think, with the ability to ask questions that we might not have been able to ask otherwise. So thank you. But one of the things that you pointed out in that letter was the swim center and the question about whether or not you could roll some of the swim center financing into the library. Has that decision been made yet?
Decision has not been made. We will ask the commission tonight to make a decision and we'll recommend that decision to the city council when we take the budget to them on the 22nd. If you don't mind, I'd like to address that when we talk about the swim center project itself. And I think we can have a discussion on that on the project itself and what we want to do with that spend. Any other high level questions about the budget? Okay, so we can continue the budget discussion. I'll encourage everybody to continue to ask questions, bring up ideas. But right now I want to go ahead and pivot to talk a little bit about the convention center. Councilmember Bernstein's up here. We'll have he'll give a little bit of introduction, and then of course Wayne Olson, Chief Economic Development Officer, can come up and talk a little bit as well. But Councilmember Bernstein, if you want to talk a little bit about that, that'd be
How
good.
much have you talked about the convention center at all?
This is the first time.
Okay, so the convention center, the situation now is that, well, what we have been made very aware of by our visitors bureau is that our convention center, there's 3 different, if we do nothing, it will continue to start losing business. We're already losing business to other convention centers and facilities within the valley, like the JW Marriott and some of the hotels, but also there's a big new convention center out in San Diego, the Gaylord, which is really starting to take business away from our city. And so the convention center itself is a city building. It actually does not make money itself. It makes money, economic impact for the city. And it is obviously tourism was our key economic driver, and Wayne Olson can talk directly about the studies that we've done as if we do nothing, if we do a moderate, and if we do what we actually plan to do, which is council had already approved to do the full project to redo the convention center. It's not really going to change the size a whole lot because of the footprint is there. What a lot of this is basic. First of all, there's maintenance, new air conditioning, new chill, whatever, which is tens of millions. There is interior upgrades that will keep up with what the modern conference and convention goer wants. One of the things, interesting things that happened during the pandemic is a lot of convention goers, convention planners retired, and a very younger group came in and said, people want experiences, they want not just the rows of chairs in front of things, they want to have meeting rooms, they want to have gathering spaces, how they want tech within their convention center, all of these things that define a modern convention center. We're also looking at things like the east side of the convention center right now really just looks like the back of the building. And there is a design a rendering, it's not really a design, of how that could be made to look like a second entrance of it, which then enables you to, and expand a little bit, enables you to have two real conventions and conferences going on at the same time, even if it's just another lobby there. There's been discussions, the plaza in front of the convention center is sometimes used for events and things. I don't know if anyone's been to them, but it's still a road normally. That could actually be filled in and make more of an official plaza in terms of it. So the project that we have done has been estimated is now about $100 million project, which is obviously quite significant. As we have gone, this is just for the actual building itself and the grounds around it. And we had initially looked at potentially doing it as a 10 or 11-year project. It then became very apparent that by doing it at a much more expedited mode to finish this by 2030, potentially I think is the date now, it would have a much greater economic impact on our city. Because the convention goers obviously don't just go to hotels, they go to restaurants, stores, and travel and everything else. So now we've looked at this $100 million project that we're looking at doing, and we're looking at various sources of funding. One of which is financing by Measure J, one of which is a potential a TOT increase, which is a little bit hard because our hotels are pretty high at that already. Another one is Measure A, which is actually really used for roads and things that it might be part of the connectivity part I'll talk about. But it's also potentially Measure A could take some of this paving money out potentially. And then what we call is the Tourism Improvement District, which is probably the most viable option right now, which is basically we're now referring to as a tourism infrastructure district, which is different than what the normal TBID is. I mean, and that basically means that businesses, and we can define how this is, it could be lodging, it could be lodging and restaurants, it could be lodging, restaurants and retail, decide to add a tax on themselves to help fund the convention center, so to speak. It is done through a protest vote, which means, first of all, they have to decide who is going to be in this district. Is it all lodging within the city? Is it all lodging and restaurants in the city? Is it all lodging, restaurants, and retail? Is it only ones within an area of the convention center? Is it only certain types of restaurants? All of this stuff can be worked out. They then do it through a vote of that's weighted by revenue and then determines whether they agree to that or not. And generally it's passed on to the customer. So you've seen other cities where they'll have a tourism improvement district line item on a tax bill. And that's probably one of the major financings of this as well, along with Measure J. So this is what this task group is working on right now. And then there's a second element to it, which you'll see the convention center connectors, which is basically the connectivity between the convention center and the downtown. Now, that is not something which I think can necessarily be bonded. Am I correct? Because there's no building to do it. Well, the convention center is what's a lease bond, so it's basically based upon the value of the building itself. There is already a bond on the convention center from several years ago. From what year?
Yeah, I don't remember what year, but it's $4.6 million funded out of the general fund. It's got about 10 years left.
So it's a $45 million that's still owed on the current one. The connectivity is a separate one. Connectivity, which is kind of an interesting one, is how do you make it so that you're connecting the convention center to the downtown to get this experience of our city? We have a unique city in that we have, any convention has to book at multiple hotels. Versus I talked about the one in San Diego, which is one hotel, one convention center. I feel it's also an advantage because we have so much within walking distance of our convention center, but people don't know it. So part of the plan now is looking at the 4 main connectors from the convention center to downtown, which the main one being Andreas. The secondary one being Amato and the tertiary ones being Tockwitz and Alejo, because that now creates that whole grid. You're connecting the 2 major hotels of the Thompson and the Kimpton with the Renaissance, the Hilton, the Hyatt are all in there. You're connecting the tribal facilities, the casino, the spa. You're connecting actually all the retail, everything on Palm Canyon. And this is really done through several means, through shade, potentially cooling, landscaping, sidewalks, most of which exist right now, lighting and wayfinding and art and beautification. So it not only helps the convention goers, it helps all the local businesses, and it actually helps a lot of the residents who live there who have wanted this sort of walking downtown. So that's what you're seeing in the convention connectors. We have put out a ballpark picture, figure, I think of 25 million for that, but that's all in the initial phases as well. So that's part of the convention center. And then the connectivity part could potentially be things that we look at replicating in different ways within the city of having more walkability to our downtown. Does that summarize it as well?
That's perfect. And before we bring Wayne up, I'd like to ask if any commissioners have any questions for Councilmember Bernstein.
Well, generally, when was the current convention center built?
I'm gonna say 86.
86, it went through a renovation in 2004.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Early
so-
2000s.
Just curious, we still have $45 million left on that convention center. So how long, like if we do $100 million in modernizing this, how long is that debt going to last?
So the current debt comes off in 2036. The intention would be if we issue debt, we would have essentially just an interest payment to make combined with the 4.6 million we currently pay. So we're looking at that interest payment being somewhere in the vicinity of $5 million. Once the current convention center debt falls off in 2036, that will be combined with the essential interest payment, and we'll have a total debt service payment of about $9 million. 4.6 will still come out of the general fund. 3 million we want the Measure J fund to fund, and then of course the tourism improvement district that Councilmember Bernstein talked about will fund the last portion of that.
The second question is actually on the funding options. So is there like the different like listed funding options? Would it be possible to take like, so Measure J would fund a portion and then potentially the tour, we're looking at combinations?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
got it.
yeah, it's absolutely a combination. I mean, it may be, it's possible it could just be a tourism improvement district and Measure J. It could be also the TOT increase and potentially Measure A, and Measure A may be better for the connectivity part of it, but that already is fully taxed, I mean, fully used already. So this is what the task group is doing right now. So we are literally, I think, 2 months into this process.
Yeah.
So there's no final decisions, but that is really where we're at now.
Sorry, just one last question. So the 10 million for design, which is a really big, is that like normal for like 10 million for just the design? Is that
Well,
common?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think earlier we mentioned it's around 10% of what you're actually building.
Oh, okay, so that's
yeah.
typical for like the 10% benchmark.
Yeah,
is
generally
typical.
you try to go to 10 to 15% for design, depending on the complexity of the project, right?
And if you look, there's like many elements. So there's the east facade, there's potentially the Jackie Lee Houston Plaza, we'll call it. Then there's the interior lobby, and then there's the hallways. And so each of these is being done because the plan is that this will not shut down during renovation. So it actually has to, because of the existing bonds, stay open, but you can close it for periods of time or parts of it. So at the same, it's all like a chess game, because we're also looking right now at, we have conventions that are booked out 3, 4, 5 years and big events in our cities. We don't want to lose any of that. And so how do we do around all of it?
Yeah, so just the 10 million for the design, that that's being essentially loaned out from just Measure J, and then we're looking at like funding for the whole $100 million from different options.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we're looking at Measure J to front the money for the design and then multiple sources to pay for the debt. Is what we're looking at.
And just to, I think, clarify, when you, for the bonds, you have to go into, you have to start using the construction within a certain period of time.
Yeah, you have to be, you have 3 years.
Yeah.
To use all the debt proceeds. And then once the construction is complete, at that time, you begin paying your debt service.
So you don't want to take the bond money until you're ready to start construction. You obviously need the design money in advance and before you do all of that. We can get the T-bid money, that could start earlier, just once they agree to all of that.
Councilmember Brooks, I have a question. An improved convention center, which is obviously necessary, has a number of beneficiaries, among them the tribe, which the more people who come into that convention center, the more people will stop at the Spa Casino and provide funding to the tribe. Has the task force considered or approached the tribe about helping fund some of the construction?
So not directly, the tribe is on the task force. So their planning director is part of it and actively involved. So they've been focused on a number of things, and particularly in the connectivity part. And what I would suggest, because we've done a walkthrough recently, what they have in their area is a great starting point. If you look, they have obviously really nice landscaping. There's a couple places outside. You'll see misters on the street. You'll see, they have what's kind of bollard lighting, which and wayfinding. So they are actively involved in all of this, and part of those streets, they actually control. Like parts of Andreas are their streets. So they're actively involved. How we approach the tribe and sort of asking for funding is a little bit a delicate balance, but they've been involved in the process and are very supportive of this. And I should mention, part of the reason why we've looked at Alejo and Tockwitz is because it really connects everything. Once Tockwitz feels walkable, then the Plaza Theater feels walkable, Arena District feels walkable. Once Alejo feels walkable, you've got the Thompson, you've got the Uptown Design District, and so all of a sudden you have all these other aspects from our city that are walkable for the residents are in that area and the convention goers and the hotel rooms.
Does the city own the parking lot behind?
The city owns the parking lot behind it.
Yes.
Well, the city leases.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we have a long-term lease with the tribe. It's actually owned by the tribe, but we have a long-term lease that extends to 2099 or something like that. That where we lease that land from the tribe, and then in turn, to help pay for that lease, we sublease the Renaissance part that they own, or they are sitting on right there next to the convention center. So we pay out around 1.67 million for the lease annually, and we get back about 1.2, 1.3 million from the Renaissance.
This is all part of section 14, so a lot of this is either tribal or a Latte land. That is there.
Question. A question and maybe a comment, I don't know, a combination. Looking at this long term in terms of Measure J and the commission. This year we had 6 million for community initiated projects. We're able to do an awful lot of good things for some organizations that aren't necessarily based on tourism, but help the residents of the city. The Boys and Girls Club, for example, the Mizell Center. I'm trying to balance some really good projects here, the convention center, firehouse, they're good projects. Needed. What happens? Does Measure J and the commission then become basically really doesn't have a lot of discretionary money to do community initiated projects for many years?
I wouldn't say for many years. I would say probably, and it's gonna take a little bit to get to the 6 million projects we got. I think we're on a cycle of once every 3 years is
Yeah.
when we really do this application process. So while the budget stays, you only set aside $1 million in each of the next 2 years, the budget gets a little bit better as you get in that third, fourth, and fifth year, and there is more room to support capital projects that Joel wants to do, to support community initiated projects. And as revenue continues to grow, you get that addition to your bottom line as well. So I would say that the next couple of years, while we still have a ton of projects to complete, as you can see on this list, it's, you know, upwards of 20 community initiative projects. We've got a list of almost 30 other projects that we're trying to complete. So I think that we wouldn't want to add more than what we've got into budget. But in year 3, 4, 5, I think room loosens up to where at that point in time, once you get some of these projects off your list, some of the community projects off your list, then you might free up staff time to also add some more capital to your list.
We have just historically, you won't mind, the commission did not do full community applications every year. So the reason you have 6 million is because it's carried over from quite a few years. In the past, there was times where we said they were gonna do 3 million for street paving and hotspots and sidewalks. And so for 3 years, you just allocated that money out. This concept now where you're doing all different types of community things is only really started with the last one, I think. And now it's
I think.
2 year, yeah. So and now you have this. So this process of a year-long process of going through applications, you probably want to do once every 3 years anyway, because now you're gonna have the process of seeing how each one goes along. Are you gonna need more money for some of them? Are some of them gonna fall off? Are you gonna come up with, you know, new things? You wanna see how each one progresses, so you do have the option, as said in the beginning, to come back and recommend to council that you increase that. I would say be cautious about trying to do a whole nother round of projects next year, just for the time it would take. But if you look at what your balance happens in 3 years out, there's a lot of you're gonna have a fund balance 50, 60, 70 million dollars that it's not allocated yet. Now, some of this will come maybe for the connectivity may come in there, and there's other things that come on board, but there's the opportunity.
I think that really backs up that our time can be spent looking at the project as we go out and see how they're coming along, rather than sitting, you know, the whole year talking about new projects, because we've got buku stuff here that needs to.
But you have,
done.
you could have 40 projects that you're
Yeah.
actually watching over the year
Yeah.
to see how they do, and not just the community initiative and the major ones. And the fire station, convention center, library, obviously the plaza is pretty much there, but they're all actively involved in changing and you're doing this. So you think Measure J is the reason why our downtown was revitalized, but it was always key that it would be downtown revitalization and community services is how it was marketed. So that, obviously library and fire station are big parts of that. Wayne, do you want to talk about convention center?
Sure. Okay, thanks, Councilmember Bernstein, appreciate it. We'll bring Wayne up, Chief Economic Development Officer. He'll have some comments and then we'll ask questions for him.
Okay, I do probably have to go now.
Okay.
So, but thank
Thank
you all.
Thank you, appreciate your,
This was my second.
appreciate your time, Councilmember.
I'm gonna be wearing a suit of armor next week.
Wayne, thank you for coming. Go ahead and put in your comments on the convention center, and then we'll move on to the other projects.
Sure, it's nice to see all of you here, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Wayne Wilson. I'm the Chief Economic Development Officer. My office is responsible for, in conjunction with Chris and Joel's offices, in developing the convention center project. I heard a question about the economic impact. There's a group called Convention Sports and Leisure. Let me back up. The process started in 2023 with a feasibility study by Convention Sports and Leisure, CSL for short. That determined the need for growth that the Councilmember Bernstein was describing. In 2024, a master plan was created, which is informing all of the decisions about what needs to be accomplished. So there's a long 3-year long series of studies. Happy to share those. that describe why and what we should be doing moving forward. So as been described, where we are at now is in the very, very early stages of implementation of that. The city managers had a monthly work group that Chris mentioned. There are working groups from the community that are working on various pieces of that. And so we're in the very, very early stages of identifying these costs. But what I could share with you is some numbers. I had to look them up on my phone because there's a lot of them. So if you'll forgive me for looking at my phone while I'm doing this. CSL did a study on the economic impact of an investment, and the way they described it was do nothing, meaning we just kind of continue with the product we have. Do a partial investment, which they described as about $40 million of investment into the building. And then they have a column called full investment. And that's the full description of about $125 million that we're describing tonight to you, which includes the connectors, the facility itself, everything surrounding the facility, landscaping, improvements to the exterior, greater leasable space. So I'll describe that in that category, and that was by the consultant, this how they described it. So the 10-year cumulative impact in direct spend in the community in the do nothing scenario, let's say for the do nothing scenario is $442 million. Sounds like a lot of money. That's a 10-year, so it's a lot of money. But the partial investment raises that almost another $100 million to 548. And then the full investment, meaning if we make the full investment of $125 million, they estimate that the return in direct spending in our community would be $614 million. So the cost of $125 million is met fivefold within the 10 years. Now that's direct spending. So wages and salaries, they estimate with a do nothing scenario would go from $309 million to about $429 million with a full investment. I have a tax one here, which is probably the most interesting. The do nothing scenario is $50 million, which is a slight reduction from what we're earning on a 10-year basis, because they anticipate that we will lose some business to the Gaylord and a few other newer products that are nearby to our community. So with the 10-year tax revenue projection with a full investment is $70 million. So within 10 years, you're making up about, well over 50% of your investment. Over 20, it would be 140, so you're exceeding your actual initial investment. So there is an actual return on this product in terms of actual tax revenue, not just community spend, but actual tax revenue, according to this projection. So we've hired Conventional Wisdom, which is a group that has done, they like to say 320 plus convention centers worldwide. They were sitting here, they would say they've done convention centers on every continent except for Antarctica, and they said, I'm going to repeat his line, if they choose to open a convention center in Antarctica, he'd be happy to help them out. And so what he tells us, and I share in this viewpoint, is you have to look at your convention center and the surrounding area as the economic engine of the city. We're heavily based in tourism and hospitality. We want to grow the business conference participation in our community, so having a product that's competitive. I've heard numbers anywhere between 2,000 and up per person that attends a conference. So the numbers are there. There is value in this investment, and it really is a function of our economic engine. And so as you look forward, I appreciate your willingness to consider the design costs as well as the future debt service. And those numbers will become more refined, probably, I'm guessing, over the next 6 to 7 months, probably, when we start to get professional folks coming in, designers, to tell us and work with Joelle's team to really understand the costs associated with this time. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, hey Wayne, thanks for those numbers.
Sure.
Quick question on how this research takes into account the fact that there is another strong competitor in the area, right? So San Diego is only an hour and a half, 2 hours away. If someone is looking at doing a convention in SoCal, maybe it was always Palm Springs, but now we have a very strong competitor in San Diego. So how does the research take into account this kind of new reality?
Thank you, Commissioner. That's an excellent question. That's the do nothing scenario. If we don't do anything, the consideration is that we're actually losing business. So there's a set of numbers right before that that are actually a little bit higher, and they're based on 2023 income. Now, obviously, we have, a complete loss in 2019, 2020 during COVID. Every convention center in the nation didn't do well. But the number actually drops in a do nothing scenario. That takes into account the lost business that would move elsewhere. So this accounts for, the numbers account for any business that's going elsewhere, but if we do nothing, there's an actual loss, if that makes sense. Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
so the baseline is already lower
The
then?
baseline would already be lower if we, and if you think about it, as that facility ages, people make their choices based on the facility and the surrounding area, and so if we do nothing, it'll continue to deteriorate over time.
And then, in terms of the 40 million partial investment, what, is there like a general kind of category of where that money would go into?
Yes, there is, Commissioner. The general number for that is the interiors, lighting, some infrastructure changes, I believe. I don't remember if the HVAC and then mechanicals included in that. But that's mostly the interior, maybe some paint on the exterior. So it would handle the facility itself only.
Like aesthetics, basically.
Aesthetics, basically. And something else that was interesting that David O'Neill shared with me, and I've come to learn, is that convention centers actually go through a sort of a maturing process. And we're at a stage, the final stage, which is maturing from a convention center to a convention center district. So if you think, for those of you that have been to LA Live, that's sort of the idea. Now, we're not going to build LA Live in Palm Springs, but the idea that it's not just a convention center you're visiting a district with activity and hospitality and, linear parks and interesting things to go and see and visit while you're and guiding you to downtown. So it's an experience beyond just the convention center. So that's really what we're doing, is we're maturing our center from just a convention center building to a district.
First, I want to thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
I listened to your presentation at the YPS meeting earlier this week, so I think you had some renderings even there.
Yes.
Have you done a study of how much of the convention center business involves Canadian attendees? Because there may be some issue with Canadian attendees going forward.
Great question, Chair. So we did discuss with some experts what the impact to international travel would be in terms of reduction of the use of the center. They believe that will not have as great of an effect as maybe people anticipate. Now, I'm talking about convention business, because most of the convention business is national, 92% of it, maybe 10% is international. It's not that there won't be an impact, but it's probably less than we would experience from the tourism side. There'll definitely be we're estimating 48% impact from the Canadian lack of travel here moving forward. So it ranges between 5 and 10% for the impact of Canadian, just at the tourism side. On the convention center side, I don't think we'll see a big impact.
Thanks, Randy. Any other questions?
Yes, the one thing that caught my ear was a lot of the technological improvements that are being made in the into the convention center, and that's probably a very good chunk of the amount of money that would be spent on enhancing the convention center. And this is what, a 20 or 30-year bond?
I think it's typically 20 to 30 years of lifetime, but 25 or 30 years for the
Most of ours are 30 years.
30 years.
So, I mean, just my concern is what plans are being made with the way technology is expanding so quickly, and especially now with AI, what plans are being made to keep up with that without what you have this
Redoing.
$125 million bond that's what you pay back in 25 years.
Great question, Commissioner Chair. Great question. And, the way we look at this, let me start with this side. So 3 dimensions of what David O'Neill's group is going to be providing is guiding us through the design that Chris described, and then creating an updated master plan that will look at what's going to happen in years 20, 25, and 30 to see, what does that horizon look like? What are the potential growth, conditions that we'll see then? Will we need additional space even yet again? And so that master planning process will take that into account. So it won't stop at year 25 or 30. This is sort of a Golden Gate Bridge, right? The next step is to enlarge the trade show and start attracting larger conventions. But that will take that into account. And then the third phase is to complete the east entrance and the east improvements. I know that didn't totally answer your question, but you're right. There's probably a lot that we need to take into consideration in terms of technology and the impacts it's gonna have on how people travel and
Well, I mean, my sense, if you look back at what technology was 25 years ago as to what it is now, I mean, I would think the planning would be more in a maybe at least 10 years out, what's it going to look like and what are we going to need and how are we gonna.
we can certainly direct our consultant to consider whatever horizon we'd like. I think that's a great idea. Just curious, Chris and I attended a conference in January called the American Lodging Investment Summit. It's where the hotel developers, the tourism industry, travel industry, and the equity and the debt come together and talk about the future. And I heard an interesting comment from the CEO of Marriott on the use of AI, because the concern is that AI would take away from, I'm sorry to get a little off topic, but it's relevant to the discussion, that AI would take away the jobs from hotel people. And his whole perspective is that's not what we use AI for. AI helps us in the back office to settle our books overnight. What AI is actually going to do is going to free up our ability to have more people being hospitable and interacting with people, because they're not going to be having to do other things. I thought that was an interesting take. So, but we'll certainly bring that message back to our consultant.
You were talking about interior work only. There's no structure going to be changed.
In the do nothing, I'm sorry, in the partial investment, it is just interior work. In the full investment, we will be adding a little space on the east entrance, so you can have that double entrance and be able to double load events at the same time. So on the east end, there will be some additional space. I think it's about 12,000 square feet. I'm sorry, I don't have the images here, but I can certainly share those with Chris and he can distribute them. And those are conceptual, by the way.
And I think you said the estimated completion date would be like 2027.
For probably 2029, I think is when we're estimating the full completion. I'd love to see it closer to 2028 for the Olympics, but
You stole my question.
yeah, oh,
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, we're 2 hours outside of LA. Did the consultant say that we could get any bleed off from that, potential financial impacts?
yes, they have, and in fact, I'll be meeting with Scott White of the Visitor Palm Springs and looking forward and ahead to how we can maximize the benefit from the Olympics.
Any other questions of Wayne?
One question, I'm just curious if the consultant gave any information about the kind of overall stability of convention tourism. It's going back to the chair's question, just in my experience of many years waiting tables downtown, tourism is so fickle. The convention business was always felt very stable, and I'm just kind of interested if any kind of numbers or anything was shared on that hard data that.
I don't have numbers, but he did tell me anecdotally that in a lot of ways the convention center business is recession proof. Because during recessions, people want to gather and discuss how to get out of the hole. And when they're doing well, they want to gather and celebrate the fact that they're not in the hole. So that's merely anecdotal, but I can certainly go back and see if he's got actual data. So, and I think that's what we've experienced. We feel fairly steady growth. And the other thing I wanted to share as well is that, the projections here are conservative. I think you've got about a point or a point and a half growth over the next years. This machine will start generating income and revenue and local revenue of 7.6 million if our economic impact is accurate. So that's an additional $7.6 million of sales tax revenue coming into the city. So we want to take that into account too.
Any other questions of Wayne? Not Wayne, thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dwayne. Okay, so I am mindful of time. I do want to make sure that we spend enough time on the budget because this is the day that we need to approve to recommend. So with that, we're going to pivot over to the other projects starting on page 2. And we're going to first start with city engineer Joel. We've done this a little bit in the the past, talk about the existing projects, but we're gonna have Joel give an update on all of his projects. We're gonna talk about the new projects Joel has recommended for the commission to approve. We'll talk about the swim center and some of the complexities there. Then we'll move on to David and Aaron in Public Works, and then finally Nick in Parks.
We're gonna have that pizza.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
dinner.
I know, right?
We'll be fast here, because a lot of these projects, everyone's hurrying to get ready. Yeah, I'll go quickly. The library right now is bidding, right? It's under, we're gonna hopefully open bid by the first week in June. And we'll know what the cost is, and we're gonna know how we're gonna go out to the bond market and pay for that project. So right now, it's the library, it's the freight building, it's also some landscaping on Sunrise. So if everything goes well, we get to build that entire project and starting, July or August.
Yay.
Any questions? Library? And the budget for it. So I think we talked about bonding, so I don't really have to get into that much, right? Okay. I'm gonna skip Victoria. I'll leave that for Public Works. What's my next one here? Going down, the Demuth Park ADA access. So we're making progress with that project. It's combined with the Demuth Dog Park project. So we're in design. We're looking at improving areas where we haven't improved ADA access, particularly where the concession center is and other places where ADA is still not where it's supposed to be. And we've been tracking this project for quite a while. So we're glad we're kind of moving in design, and we're going to start constructing on that soon.
Talking about 1924.
Yes, 1924.
And that's combined with which one?
Well, that's actually the Demuth Dog Park. 9/21/16.
Yep.
Moving down, the recreational fields, that project is complete, so there's really not much. One thing to note on this one, I don't know, Chris, if you want to mention it now, but the remaining budget, I know we've been asked before, what happens to the remaining budget when a project is complete? So right now, we're gonna request that the remaining budget on that get transferred to the Demuth Dog Park, and I'll explain in a little bit why. So the Demuth Dog Park right now, it's actually not just a dog park, it's several projects rolled into one. I know I've mentioned before that, as the community requested projects like this is broken at the park, we need this other function. So I started combining them, very similar to the swim center. So the Demuth Dog Park is the 2 dog parks. We're going to be doing restrooms, we're going to do water stations. We're also going to improve the drainage in the parking lot, because I don't know if anyone's driven by there when it rains and there's just like a lake. So we're combining all that into one big project, but that big project comes with a price tag. The price tag right now that I'm looking at is about $8 million. So with the money we've set aside with Quimby, with Measure J funding and capital fund, I'm going to be able to pay for that. But that's why we're requesting that the fund that was remaining on the other project and one below get transferred to the Demuth Dog Park. And Chris can speak a little bit more about that. Fire station number 1, I'm also involved in that. It's actually 2 projects, really. It's fire station number 1 and fire station number 3. We're looking to start that design process here fairly soon. We have some conceptual drawings, and we're moving forward with that project. My goal is to do it as a progressive design build. So essentially getting a contractor and an architect together in the same room, and then moving the project forward to design, so they can, investigate any issues up front and hopefully minimize change orders throughout the project. Moving down, the community initiated projects, I'll skip over that one. The pedestrian streets master plan, it's still the 2 projects that we have under design right now is and I'm sorry if I'm going too fast, but that's 2221. The 2 projects that we have under design is Racket Club and South Palm Canyon. That's essentially taking a 4-lane road and reducing it to a 2-lane road, introducing bike lanes and making it more of a walkable, friendlier, slowing down traffic project. So one of the things that we ran into with the Racket Club is that we're also working with the fire station. Fire station number 3 is actually on Racket Club, so we're coordinating closely with the fire station. They do have some concerns that if we essentially reduce lanes, we actually reduce response time. So we're really taking a step back. That's why that project's not moving as fast as we wanted to, because we're investigating. Response times do get compromised if we do change the design.
That's the station up next to Victoria Park.
That's where that that big dog, blue dog is. So that's fire station number 3, correct. just moving down. Pickleball courts, well, I'll probably let Nick talk a little bit more about this one, but that project's still moving forward. You know, the design's complete. We got in bids. Some of the bids came in a little bit higher. We had some issues with the two bidders, the lowest and second lowest bidder. So we're analyzing what our next steps are with the pickleball courts. Going down, let me see, the annual paving, as Chris Mooney mentioned, that he's taking my money away, he's not giving me enough money, but I'm making do. So we are under construction right now. And I do want to touch on a little question you had earlier, Chair Sipkins. You said that when we pave, that there's no real visual sign that it's a Measure J project, but we have been putting A-frames almost every street that we pave. So if there's a paving project going on, if you get near it, you'll see that there's a sign there that says Measure A. We incorporated it into our specs, and we actually have our contractor do that for all our projects. So we do put the word out there. We try our best to make sure that folks know that we are promoting Measure J as we're paving our streets. See the Plaza Theater, that one's under construction. My team's actually working on that one as well. We're hoping to have it completed in October, because they're already programming events, so we have to have it completed. So that one's under construction. So here's the other one, the 1707. That was an old project that we closed out, but there was remaining funds. We're asking to take those funds and put them back into the Demuth Dog Park project that I mentioned earlier. That's several projects combined into one.
Wait, I'm sorry, 1707?
Yes, 1707.
I'm not familiar with that project.
That was an older project. It was in the downtown pedestrian. We did a lot of pedestrian enhancements, so traffic signals. There's the two-way crossing. I don't know if you're familiar, right on Topway and Pumpkin, the two-way, the scramble crosswalk. That was part of it, but it was the entire corridor that we were actually upgrading our traffic signal system.
Okay.
And that one was completed, and there's remaining funds that I want to take and put it back into another project.
Before we go on, 'cause I think you're about ready to get into your new stuff here.
Yeah.
Because the downtown project is Public Works. So every commissioner's opportunity to ask Joel any questions about the projects he just covered before we go into some of the new stuff. Does anybody have any questions about those projects we covered?
Concerns? Praise?
Yeah, good job. Yeah.
How do you do so much?
But we'll have to cover the back sometimes, right?
All right, let's talk a little bit about the swim center. Talk about the project, Joel, and I'll talk about the financing.
Well, the swim center project really started as a small project, right? It was also community initiated. They wanted the locker rooms fixed, right? And they also said that there's a ADA component that needs to be fixed. Well, little by little, the project started growing and growing and growing. The fence needed to be fixed. Basically, there's only one way to get in, and if you're have ADA accessibility issues, you actually have to go to the men's locker room. And there's just, the building itself is dated. There's issues with it. So our architect went in, redesigned it, introduced showers. There's privacy issues that are being addressed. Also the roof itself, because it is an older building, and it's open. We're gonna put a canopy on top of it.
Yeah.
We're also gonna add a new office in the front. The entrance is gonna get expanded because the entrance itself is not very wide. So the whole project grew in scope, and that's why I think I mentioned last time that I needed around $7 million to get to construction. And that's what I think Chris might talk a little bit about, of how we intend, or how you want to kind of move that project forward and the funding for it.
Yeah, so we've got $4 million in fiscal year 26 and $3 million in fiscal year 27, for a total of $7 million for the swim center. And the idea would be to free up some cash to ensure that there's enough cash to move forward with the design work. To move that into the library debt issuance. So 2 distinctive projects, 2 distinctive budgets. Library budget's 25 million, swim center budget's 7. Total debt issuance would be about $32 million. It frees up cash, number one, which I don't really think we have a problem with cash right now with this in the budget. However, it would be nice to have a little conservatism in the budget as far as cash goes to fund the design work. We pitched this to our financial advisor, Susan Harrell, who's been here with the city since early 2000s. And admittedly, at first, she wasn't really thrilled about it. But as we have got to talking, because this is a 2-year project, right? And so if you've got the money to pay go, do you really want to finance it over 30 years? Well, this probably will be a long-term renovation. Once this swim center is done, but whether it's a 30-year renovation or not, it'll be a significant amount of term. So it does make sense to do some sort of financing with it from that respect. It also makes sense to free up funds for cash, but it also frees up funds if a project comes up as well to that we haven't thought about during this budget process, that we can bring back to the commission at some time to maybe fund another project that the city wants to do. So, and whereas right now with this project being in there, it's a little tight in 26, got some room in 27, but it does free up a little bit of money for projects as well as ensures we have the cash for the convention design and the fire station design. So that is what we want to do. I'll take questions on that right now, but I'd like to have a little bit of discussion on it if the commission wants to talk about it. And then, of course, when we get done talking about projects, we want to spend a little bit of time on changes to the budget. So we want to talk about whether or not you want to remove that from the budget expense and roll that into the debt. We can talk about it at that time. I'm more than happy to take any questions the commission has about that financing move for the swim center.
I don't wanna talk about financing, but the safety in the plan. Of people coming over the wall from Ramones into.
Yeah, that one, that's been very, very clear to the design team, and I know David's team's also working on other aspects of the pool, so yeah, that will be incorporated into how the new design and the new build, we will
Yeah.
address that issue.
Yeah, that's what I learned when I visited. And the lifeguards were told not to go into the building alone, into the shower part, because people were coming over. The plant pyracantha there, don't put it back things, because you're not gonna get over. But it's dangerous.
Right,
And,
then
you know, they have everything, a shower, a bathroom, and
we took that information
Yeah.
and provided it to the design
And
team, so they're
the-
very well aware
Good,
of the.
good.
Any other questions?
Yeah, it's the swim center really feels kind of like part of that complex with the leisure center and the pavilion. Has there been any discussion of similar improvements to those facilities as well, or have that not been raised yet?
There has been discussion on it, so we want to concentrate, Nick will tell you he wanted to put in some money in the later years for some of that replastering of the pool and the pavilion being redone. And, you know, I said, well, let's not quite do that now, let's see how the building turns out and make sure that project gets done. Plus, we're a little bit tight on some of the funding here for Measure J until you get to 28, 29. So we're going to concentrate on construction of the building. But we are well aware of that, and our Nick and David and Aaron are well aware that that needs work, and that's probably going to be a phase 2 of this project.
Okay, and just follow up, so just so I'm clear, so the combined financing of the library and the swim center would give us more flexibility in the future if we're looking at improvements for the leisure center and pavilion.
Correct.
Mr. Krause.
Do we have a joint use agreement with the school district for use of the pool? And if, this might be for Nick, and if so, do they pay anything for use? Sorry.
No, all good. Yes, we do. Yeah, so we have an agreement with the Unified School District for their swim teams to utilize the pool, and they do pay us a monthly fee for use. It's still low dollar, but they still pay us a fee.
Nick, you want to stay up here for a minute, just short? Well, we'll talk about swim center. Is there any other questions? Nick can help from, yeah, he's director of Parks and Rec, so from that perspective, he could talk a little bit about the swim center. Anybody have any other questions about the project itself? Future of the swim center or the financing that we would like to recommend to the commission?
Do you anticipate this will affect the library getting financed and completed?
That's an excellent question. We've been asked that a couple of times. So, and I know the Director of Library Services, Jeannie's right back here, to make sure we don't spend her library money. Jeannie has actually posed that question. No, the library is a project that we have, priority project for the city. We've talked about it for several months as well, in conjunction with the fire station. Back when we completed the current 2-year budget, it was part of that conversation to issue debt. So we prepared the council commission at the time that we want to go forward to the library. As Joel just told you, the bids are out. We should be getting bids back later this month for the library. That project is moving forward, and it will be moving forward uninterrupted.
So in total, then.
Correct.
I just have a general observation, Chris, and that is, we focused heavily, obviously, on community initiated projects this year.
Mhm.
The commissioners all spent untold hours reviewing applications, financing. Next year, it sounds like we're not gonna have that same obligation. But we're gonna have an obligation to check on the process, progress made by all of these various projects, including the $6 million that we've allocated or recommended allocation for this year. But at all of the meetings so far, not being critical at all of Joel or anybody else in the back of the room, we breeze through these real quickly. It's very, very hard to know exactly where those projects are in terms of percentage of completion or issues that they're facing or things of that nature. So I'm just hopeful that I'm not sure who's gonna be the chair next year, but whoever the chair of this commission is, ask that the people who are managing these projects in Joel's group or otherwise, or Nick's group or whatever it might be, spend more time talking about the details of the project, where they are, what's being done, and follow up a little bit with what Commissioner Funderburk said, for all of us to go out and look at these projects so that we know exactly what's being reported back and ask questions about it. So that's my comment.
Yeah, I can respond to that, right? Prior to this new commission and in prior years, we did spend a lot of time on the projects, right? And one of the things is I was asked, well, month after month, I would essentially report the same thing. Projects do go fairly slow in the city, right? If you look at the library, it started in 2016. So I can give updates and I would write the memos, but I would find myself essentially repeating the same thing. Not that I'm not moving fast. Projects are in different phases, engineering, construction, and we are more than happy to report what's going on. But a lot of times the same thing is going on month after month. So as long as the commission understands that if we bring project updates, you're not going to get new information every month. You may get something new that happened, 2-3 months. We opened a bid, we finished design, so the real fine details with we're in construction, I can't bring those forward, but I don't know how much to get into, right? How much detail do you really want to know about? We're pouring concrete today. We're digging a footing. We can bring those forward as well, but so there's a fine balance, I think, that I will try to be better at moving forward.
Okay, we'll move on. While Nick's up here, I'd like for him to talk a little bit about stuff going on related. Nick, do you want to make any comments on the swim center first, about your thoughts with that and then maybe future? And then we'll move into the pickleball courts and then you got downtown amphitheater on here.
Sure. So Joel pretty much covered it regarding the project itself. I do want you all to know as well, since my arrival here, we've really been engaging our swim center team to do a lot more structured programming and looking at the staffing levels, because right now we only close at 3 p.m. And so there are some considerations in the future extending public hours so that we could accommodate more programming. And so the team is currently working on what that type of structured programming looks like, more health and wellness programming, things like a structured aqua boot camp, more swim teams that we could do there, and then kind of generating overall additional revenue, although small revenue, some additional revenue coming back into the city for the use of that facility. So we're excited about this project. If it is overall going to get improved, or our swimmers ask about this almost every day, since we have done a lot of previous engagement about this. And so we're looking to actually kick this off and start working on it. And then regarding some of the other projects, As Joel mentioned regarding the pickleball courts over at Demuth Park, we are currently evaluating those bids right now. They did come in a little bit higher than what we had anticipating. So we're reviewing that right now with engineering on what we are going to be doing next. We also did go to council yesterday regarding some temporary courts that we will be renovating over at the temporary campus that College of the Desert currently has at Baristo and Hermosa. It's going to the College of the Desert Board of Trustees approval tomorrow, and once they approve it, then we can go ahead and make those small minor renovations over at that campus to convert them into temporary pickleball courts. So that'll give our pickleballers some use of play once that construction project actually kicks off. And then regarding the downtown park project, the downtown amphitheater. So we just engaged a landscape architect to look at the amphitheater currently and give us some options on what we can do there as far as some increased AV usage to kind of do a lot more concerts and entertainment in the downtown park. And then also look if there's some enhancement that we can do to actually the structure of the amphitheater itself, whether it's creating like a band shell or some other kind of renovations there. Other than that, I think that's it on the.
Anything about the Moose Dog Park you want to add?
Joel covered it. We are in the process right now of kind of reviewing the design and hoping to kick off construction soon on that. We've created a dog park ad hoc committee as well to engage all of our dog park users to ensure that we're keeping them up to date on the project, just so that they are aware of what's going on.
Okay, any questions for Nick?
And forgive me if I just somehow missed this, but did you mention 1507, the splash pad repair in the downtown park?
I will let Public Works.
That's a public works project, yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to keep this meeting going on forever, but I do have a last question for you.
Sure.
You're confident that the pickleball court contract will ultimately go through, that you'll be able to work out whatever the overage is and work with the contractor with the bidder?
I don't have an answer for you all this evening, as we're still reviewing that. And we also have to engage our pickleball ad hoc committee, that part of the Parks and Recreation Commission. So we will actually be discussing that Monday evening and then coming up with a recommendation on how we proceed.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Nick? Okay, thank you, Nick, appreciate it. As we bring David and Aaron up Public Works, I want to give a comment on a couple of projects. So on this list, if you look at 1916, which is PD 911 CAD RMS, so this is the computer automated dispatch system that the police department is going to use Measure J funds for implementation. They issued an RFP, and the person they were going to select to put the system in actually merged their business with the person who designed the system. So that created a conflict of interest. And so we are going to have to go back out to bid once again for the PD 911 CAD RMS system. This is a project that never ends. And then one more, if we go down to 1923, this is keyless entry phase 2. This is putting keyless entry at all of our fire stations. And I think Aaron and David are in charge of the project, so it's IT is involved. So this project is finally going to get done in 26. Aaron is going to work on fire station number 4 first, and then we're going to hit them all. So we're going to be spending some of that money as well. So with that, David, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'll roll through these. Please ask any questions or stop me. So the first one would be 1806, which is Victoria Park restrooms. So that one, plans have been approved and the project is expected to go out to bid in early 26. So in the next couple of months sometime. 1810, portable vehicle barricade system. So procurement is scheduled for that in early 26, and I can explain that if you guys have questions, but otherwise I'll keep rolling through. Please. I'm sorry.
Is that for downtown only?
Since these are portable, they will be for downtown or any other area we need them.
They're not going to be buried.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the original plan was to have the bollards in place, and
Yeah.
David kicked that one to the curb and got these portable ones so we could use everywhere.
Yeah, that's a
Right.
good idea.
It really allows us to expand the event or contract it without having to put bollards at every
Yeah.
single intersection
Did that.
across Palm Canyon. Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. 1923 Tequila Century, Chris talked about that. I'll move down to 1925, life safety improvements, fire sprinklers. A citywide fire sprinkler assessment was recently completed. As that's reviewed and completed, then repairs and system additions will be addressed in the upcoming year. 1926, emergency generators, city facilities. Purchases are planned to begin in early fiscal year 26. However, just a note, lead time for that is generally about a year. Moving on to 1927, HVAC city water treatment program. Needs assessment is currently underway, and we anticipate beginning work in 2026. And what that really is for the HVAC system, it's to upgrade the water in the cooling towers. We'll move down to 2004 Sunrise Plaza HVAC improvements, and what that is really to address immediate needs and replacement for their HVAC infrastructure for those facilities. 2220, no, excuse me, I'll skip that one. 2226 San Rafael Drive turf conversion. So the initial conceptual design and cost estimates have been received. This project will require an additional $200,000, which we will be discussing with folks to offset with savings from other projects that we anticipate having savings. And then to your 1507, which is the downtown park project. So the spray ground, that work is currently out to bid today. So we expect to award that in July. And work the downtown spray around the park.
The splash pad.
Splash pad,
What was-
also known as a splash pad.
Yeah, what was wrong with it? It's never worked.
It's prior to my time, but it really, my understanding is it's never functioned appropriately, and so we're correcting. So,
Water
More-
leaking.
yes, so very happy to see this moving forward.
Regarding the 2226, the San Rafael Drive turf conversion, Dave has said that it's gonna require more money. We're not gonna add anything in the budget. We're gonna let some of his projects roll out and complete. He has indicated there will be funding left over. It should be sufficient funding to cover that. And at the time we know what that funding is, we'll bring back to the commission for an approval.
Thank you.
Any questions for David on his projects? Any questions at all on these projects listed here? Okay. Be keeping in mind at the end of our conversation, we're gonna be asking the commission to discuss any changes they'd like to make, so keep that in mind. We'll move over to community initiated projects, which is the next page. We won't go into the detail on some of these projects, a lot of them that are in play are completed. This is our list of all the projects that we have approved. So the way the staff report is gonna work on the 22nd, the one that's gonna be posted on Monday evening. Just so the city council has all of the information. All of these projects that were approved will have a little paragraph in the staff report stating what it is. And one of the attachments will also have a link to the application itself for all of the approved projects, so that the council has access to all of that. A second attachment will be the application to all of the rejected applications, so the council has access to that information. If they want to run through that and maybe recommend one of those projects could be funded and one of the projects you approved to come off. So they'll have all the information there they'll need for a good, robust discussion on community initiated projects. I don't have anything else to say about the community initiated projects. Does anybody want to have any questions or comments about the process we'll go through, or about the projects themselves?
Well, I keep beating my drum on this, but number 12, the checks are issued and we had the guests come and speak to us. but I think there's supposed to be many schools incorporated within that original application. And I just wonder what's an update? Where are they?
Yeah, we
There
can
are
certainly
more?
ask her to come back and give an update. But that's a great point that you bring up, and that's why that we want to have a commissioner appointed to these community initiated projects to oversee them, to ensure the timing of the funding is used appropriately. The project is moving forward as they stated in their application, and just to oversee it themselves. And so that's going to be important as we move forward with the community initiated projects for the commission to be involved and have a commissioner oversee. That's something we don't do on the small grants and sponsorships, but it's very important here, I believe, for the commission to do that, just to give the other commission members confidence that the project is moving forward as intended.
I would like to see that as a part of the agenda for next fall, because they've had a year. And I'm out in schools and I haven't seen, that doesn't mean they're not there. I just have not had the
Right.
experience. And I asked the question and it was like.
Well, I'll make
I'm
I'll make the motion that as your term ends, you continue to monitor this project.
I'm sitting back there complaining. I resist.
I think we give her emeritus status.
Right.
But this is seriously important.
It is.
$100,000 and $80,000,
right.
if I'm correct.
I totally agree.
Then, you know, it should be done.
Yeah, no, great point, and that's just a reminder of how we should be moving forward on the project. Commissioner Newby?
Well, and that brings up, and I brought this up before, and I'll do it again. I worked in nonprofits a long time. Very rarely on large grants do we get the check issued to us. And I don't know if there are any reporting requirements back as to what they're doing and where it's at. And if the checks are, we'll issue a check when for what you've expended or in advance for what you've expended. You have to show us receipts back for what you've spent. I mean, some sort of, to avoid the problem that the city had, in this past year, but some way that there's real accountability for these funds that are sent out. Just sending someone a check for $180,000 and then we don't know what they're doing with it, really concerns me, as we're stewards of the public funds with this commission. So I just really feel that there should be some stronger oversight of these, not everyone, but over 50,000 or over 100,000, whatever it is, that there's stronger oversight and a report. When you're done or 6 months in, we want a report. And when you're done, we want a report. So that we know that the funds have been expended the way we expected them.
Yeah, we do require a report to be completed on the small grants. We're going to do the same thing here. Again, that's why we have a commissioner assigned to a project. Is for that oversight. That has not been done in the past. And so we're going to make that practice.
I understand you correctly, maybe I'm hearing wrong. That going forward, next year's commission, for example, the commissioners would be assigned projects for each of the commissioners to monitor and report back to the commission as a whole. And to pick out, for example, let's say the Kaufman American Legion. Whoever is assigned that project would come back and say, I checked with the project and they are currently redoing the interior, or redoing the bar, and they're whatever it is, and they needed this much money. That's what you're suggesting?
Yeah, just a general oversight. I think we mentioned this in the prior meeting, but we didn't go into detail of what the expectations are. But it would be general oversight. And it would just be for the grant only projects. Obviously, projects that are ran by city staff would not need that oversight, because of course we have the oversight. Grant only projects, and there's a few of them on here, but we've, from the original application that stated grant, we've changed some of those to city projects. So there's not as many as we thought, but yeah, I think the expectation is that we have some general oversight
Thank you.
Okay, I am going to move now to go back to the front page. I'm gonna ask the commission to suggest. Any changes if they want to change anything on the budget to go forward, so. We will talk about some of the recurring stuff first. So let's talk about the streets budget of $8.5 million. So, does the commission, want to discuss, are they okay with the amount? Do we want to talk about it a little bit? What does the commission think about maintaining $8.5 million? Or do you want to give Joel 12 like he wants?
Can I make a
Give us a
different
dinner line
suggestion?
item.
I think that Joel's budget is perhaps the largest chunk out of this whole budget that's movable in some way, up or down. But it's impossible for us to do that until we know what other changes we're gonna be making. So, for example, I am gonna ask that we have some money for publicity or public relations. It may be that you're gonna wanna take that money from the $8.5 million to give Joel, but if we already tell Joel he can have the $8.5 million, we can't go back and say, no, you can't. So that, can we move him to the end rather than the beginning?
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and here's what I'll say. I'll just open it up for discussion. And Chair, if you want to lead that discussion in the manner, then we'll leave it up to you as to the organization of how we want to do this. But yeah, we can start with the motion, if that's, you mentioned that, so you want to make a suggestion, that'd be great.
I would like to add something to the budget with respect to publicity and public relations and the creation of some signage that would allow the residents of Palm Springs to know that a measure is being funded by Measure J. So I don't know what the number is, I'd leave that up to you, but I think it should be like $75,000 to $100,000.
Yeah, I think in the past we've done 100. We probably found that to be a little more than necessary because the city's communication staff has a piece of their budget that goes to this very well. I think if the commission wanted to do or somewhere in the vicinity of 50,000, I think that's a reasonable number. It's probably still a little bit more than what we need, but you know, we can use that number and go from there.
And I'm willing to make the motion at $50,000. We have to do it officially by motion.
I don't think we have to do a roll call vote. I think if we can just all agree.
At the end.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll make, that'll be one change to the budget. Does anybody have any other suggestions?
Well, that brings up a question.
Mhm.
So for argument's sake, we're putting 50,000 into the public relations. Does that mean we have to take 50,000 away from someone else? Is this a?
Not necessarily.
I mean, the budget, what you
Yeah.
said, the budget goes up or down depending.
Yeah, I think this is something that can be absorbed by the budget itself in its current state. If we want to make changes like the streets, if we're gonna make a $500,000 change or a $200,000 change, then I think we talk about cutting somewhere else. But something like for 50,000, I think we can absorb it in our current budget without changing anything else.
And then I also have another question. There's project cost overruns of 500,000. Does that cover all of the projects that we just went over or just the community initiated projects?
It covers everything but the community initiated projects. The community initiated has its own overage bucket of 1.2 million. So we set aside that large bucket because, you know, that those projects haven't been vetted yet. Most of these projects on the project list have been vetted at least to some extent by city staff. So we felt $500,000 would hopefully cover that. If we exceed that amount, we would come back to the commission for an approval, a recommendation for approval of another appropriation to cover overages that we can recommend to the council. But 500,000 is the number I have suggested. We could certainly talk about it.
Under that, are you talking about publicity about Major J? Is that what you're talking about? When I first came on, they're talking, we had a ton of signs we talked about, and also something that went in the street. Remember, Joel? Do you remember that? Where is that stuff?
Well, I think it would be working with our communication staff to determine some sort of plan. So the $50,000 would be Measure J's contribution to the city's campaign to promote all of our projects, but I don't think we could get too specific right now. I think that the communications could lead that effort, but work with us to develop some sort of plan that we could really promote our projects.
And Amy Blaisdell's group would have to be involved, obviously.
Right.
Any other suggestions to make changes with the budget?
An observation. As I've listened here tonight, it seems that we have. Our challenge is this. We're going to, in this budget, spend $11.5 million. For. Very good projects. Okay. And. An increase of. Just about $2 million for roads. At the same time. We're pretty much. Gonna be able to maybe fund 3 or 4 community initiative projects next year. And for many years to come. And so the challenge is we have. The push. To make sure tourism stays strong. And that is a challenge to what we can do for the residents who live here. And I think that's what I'm struggling with tonight. And as I said, part of making a strong city is making it very livable for the residents who live here year round. And I'm a little concerned about how we're balancing that in this budget and the years going forward. And so I'm going to suggest that we talk about 2 million for community initiated projects and $7.5 million for roads. That's still $1 million increase for roads. And it is a $3.5 million increase for roads from 2 years ago. That's pretty healthy. 3.5 million. So I'm just gonna throw that out there for general discussion. Just my thoughts, maybe isn't anybody else's, but that's our kind of tug and pull here in terms of public policy, it seems to me. And I know streets benefit all of our residents as well. So I put that in the same bucket. And that's why I'm saying we could do some balancing here to still fund some community initiated projects where we've been able to really help some organizations. Not only for tourists, but for the residents of the city as well. So I'll just throw that out there.
Thank you. Any comments for what has just been said by the commissioner?
Yeah, I just had a question to clarify, when you say 2 million, do you mean still looking at a cycle where we would open an application like 2 years from now, 3 years ago, three years from now, or? And then that money would carry over?
No, I'm saying we have a budget of 2 million for new community initiated projects next year.
And then also have a new round of applications next
Sure,
year,
yeah.
okay.
Yes,
I think.
and then 7.5 million for roads. Instead of 8.5 million, as I said, which is a very healthy increase from 2 years ago.
That's helpful. I just want to say quickly that I do really share that concern. I think that a big issue here is just logistically, we have so many projects and there's just not enough staff time. So I don't know, like the feasibility adding more projects so soon. I wonder if we could perhaps split the difference and if it would be possible to have some of those funds available for grants so that we are able to, help support a lot of these really worthy community efforts, but it's not putting things on the list for city staff who are really kind of at the max, it seems like right now.
Commissioner Lee?
Yeah, my thoughts regarding that proposal is, and as a resident who spent $500 or thereabouts to have a rim repaired because of a pothole on South Palm Canyon. I do think that roads are a priority for the residents of the city. And yes, they benefit everybody, but I really think the roads and there's been some improvements I've seen, but I think it is such a huge project and they come under such intense heat, intense pressure, increased traffic, that to take any money out of the roads, I was actually thinking of putting more money into it. And my understanding, as it's explained with community initiated projects, that if we're going to be having some 25 or so projects to oversee by members of the commission, that, that's putting a lot of extra time on the commissioners, which I don't particularly mind, but I'm kind of sort of retired. And the community initiated projects did, just because we only have $1 million or $2 million for community initiated projects. My understanding is, let's wait 3 years, let's build that up, and then we can do community initiated projects. Because I guarantee you, if we say we're doing community initiated projects, they're not going to look at how much we have available. We're going to get 50 applications. Which we're all gonna have to review and go through and then make hard decisions on. So I like the idea of putting community initiated projects, building up the funds for that for 3 years. And would like to find some way to add another $1 million for the street repair.
And from a staff perspective and from engineering, the street fund, it is generous, right? You said we were having 4 before, but part of that is we weren't keeping up with the maintenance of the actual streets and what's required. I don't know if everyone's noticed, we're hitting hard at local streets, but our major arterials we can't do, because one major arterial takes most of my budget. If I try to do, say, Ramon Road for just one segment, I'm spending $3-4 million, $5 million. So what I've been doing is balancing local roads and slowly introducing the arterials. We were not doing arterials because we were really behind on locals. So I started doing locals, and now I've been doing arterials. So we try to do a little bit more, but the project shrinks into just 1 or 2 streets with even $9 million. And the reports say we should be spending $12 million a year, really, on our paving to really be at a normal level or comparable to other cities. So if you take money away, we'll still do a project. It's we accept the money, but it's just we're not going to keep up, and our arterials are never going to get done.
Joel, how much, I'm sorry, how much do you get from the general fund as opposed to from?
We don't use any general fund money for paving. We use all Measure J.
For roads, it's all comes from Measure J?
Correct. The paving program right now has been sponsored by Measure J.
Well, that's the biggest complaint you get from, or not complaint, ask that you get in the community. But you made a comment that a lot of our citizens do not realize that that money's coming from Major J. So the two need to have a little connection, and I think he needs more money. Because I think everybody drives on these roads, and they're kind of screaming at us. So,
Well, maybe that's the question to ask Chris, if you were to try to add
where would you?
money back into the $8.5 million, where would you get it from?
If we wanted to increase the 8.5
Well,
million.
there's been a couple of commissioners who have said they'd like to perhaps get more money to Joel for roads. Where are we gonna come from?
Yeah, it's likely gonna have to come from another project or another budgeted item in 26. In 27, it looks like we've got a little bit of fund balance that we could use. We probably wouldn't have to reduce a project, so. If the commission wanted to do 8.5 million this year, but maybe increase that to 9 million next year, I think that's doable without having to affect any of the other projects that's being funded.
What do the commissioners think who are proposing increasing that budget?
What did you say?
Is that, is a $500,000 in the next fiscal year, not 25, 26, but 26, 27? Does that satisfy your concerns? About the budget for roads?
I don't have that concern, but I really agree. We could do 8 and then bigger next year when you have a little more flexibility, but it's important. I really think it's one thing people want.
Well, I think for me, anything, I mean, that sounds like a good way to approach it, because and this is not meant as a criticism, but we are also absorbing something that we're just hearing about for the most part today, and that's the convention center improvements. And so that's taking away, funds that we would normally have to use in this budget. So I think given that, and it's clear to me that those funds are going to go forward, that putting it into the 25, 26, 27 budget, my glasses on, 26, 27 budget at least helps address that, because while it's considerably more money, my guess is that the costs have gone up significantly, especially since the 22, the COVID and all the problems. I mean, we've seen construction prices all across the board go up considerably in that.
Yeah.
And let me just address the funding real quick, because what you see here is actual spend on the roads, but actually the last 2 contracts, the first contract in 25, 26 was $8.7 million. We just didn't spend that much in that year, carried over to the next year. This year's contract is $8 million even. So we have increased our spend significantly over the past couple of years. And we're going to go to 8.5 if that's what the commission wants to approve this year.
Commissioner Isaac? Yeah. So all the money for street repairs comes from Measure J.
For my paving project, currently, yes.
Where did money come from prior to Measure J?
So I think there is a gas tax and Measure A is another available fund that we use, but Measure A is the one that's helping me build bridges that are currently in construction or plan.
So it's city funded.
Measure A is a gas tax that we get back.
Okay.
Neighbors and county.
And you still get that?
We still, but that money still comes in and I use it throughout my budget. So one of the things to understand is the money you see here, the projects here are not all the projects we have and are not all the.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
So we do use a lot of different funding sources, and my budget looks completely different than just Measure J when we actually go to council, because I incorporate all the other funds and create the projects like that. So Measure J is a small portion of my entire capital project.
Yeah. So prior to Measure J, you only had Measure A.
I'm assuming so. I'm gonna say yes, but I was not here during that time. So since I've been here,
I'm just curious, and that. So I think the city's doing very well in terms of the money that it's putting into roads. I really do.
Right.
And it has continued to do well. My only concern was a little more balance somewhere in this budget. I mean, we got 11.5 million sprung on us tonight for design work. And at the same time, we're pulling way back on community initiated projects. That to me is this, I'm not saying I'm gonna vote against it, but I just want to make the point. I hope that doesn't continue.
Yeah, historically, we were putting, the commission would put aside $1 million. We just changed that practice over the last couple of years because the council wanted to fund at a greater pace. So you are right, the last couple of years, the council has put more money into community initiative projects. I will say, and address what Commissioner Wolfer was talking about earlier, Commissioner Newby, is we have a lot of projects going on right now, and we have a lot of community initiated projects. Historically, we have let that fund build year over year over year, and then once every 3 years, we've done an application process. So in the out years and in the next year, if the commission wanted to, obviously, we're a little tight in 26. In 27, there's room if the commissioner wanted to recommend more dollars for community initiative projects, we could do that. We could do 2 million, we could do $1.5 million. And that would be something to consider. But again, the funds would build over 3-year period. And then in 28, you would do another application process. And what that does is it gives the city time to get these projects off our list, frees up time to do that again.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, to your point, that would be my recommendation, because it just seems logical. The more we market and increase our public marketing about Measure J, it's going to entice more people to be involved. And so if our most recent process generated 6 million, then I would imagine the next process is gonna generate even more. So if we come up with a number that we're able to build on and then start that process again in 3 years, then we would have an amount that's more ideal based off of what we've experienced in the past, and a little cushion based off of what we're going to forecast in the future. So my recommendation would be to increase the community initiated projects by 2 million, or at least 2.25 million, to build a little bit more of a cushion for the next phase of application.
Which year, Commissioner, and this coming
The
year? or
third
second
year, the third year. You said
27, I think, yeah, 26 is tight, 27 could probably absorb some more, so whatever number the commission agrees on, yeah.
Question, Chris, and kind of forgive me for this one, can you break down quickly like how TOT funds are used in the city? I know there's like some portion for affordable housing, and a lot of it goes back into like tourism, but how does that get spent?
Yeah, so, yeah, you're right. We have a percentage that goes to affordable housing, which is about 3 million a year. TOT revenue is about $50 million a year. We have some pass-through dollars that go for the Tourism Bureau or Business Improvement District. And we have some support for Visit Greater Palm Springs and some support for PS Resorts. But largely the TOT that the city receives goes back into the general fund to support general fund uses.
I wonder if could there be a scenario in which the design expense for the convention center and the connectors, I think in these 2 years, that's about what, 7.5 million? I wonder, could that possibly be split between TOT funds and Measure J, so that then we could use some of that remaining balance to put into roads?
It's a great question, and I'll just tell you, I have a little bit of firsthand knowledge about the general fund budget. And you'll see as we present that to the council on the night of the 22nd, there's probably not room enough to do that in the general fund over the next couple of years.
All right, I'm reaching the point where I'm about to call a question. Anybody have any other comments? If not, you want to do a quick rundown of any changes you want to make?
So first, before we do that, is there a change to the 2027's budget for community initiated projects somebody would like to propose? Right now, it's at $1 million. Is there a proposal to increase that to something different?
You're talking about the second year.
The second year. Second year.
And
If you want me to make a if you would like me to make a recommendation, I would say the budget could support an additional $1 million in that year, or a total of 2 million, 2027.
But question, then that would be that extra million would be either the decision then does it go to roads or does it go to community initiated projects? Is
If
that
we,
right?
let's scroll down on the second column, look at the fund balance at the very bottom. When you see that right now, it looks like it's 7.8 million just for the Measure J fund. So if we take $1 million, my recommendation would be to leave all the other projects as is, and then just lower the fund balance down to 6.8 million.
And leave the streets at 8.5.
Leave the streets at 8.5.
That's great.
Now, there's also, the budget could also support an increase in streets if you wanted to do that. If you wanted to take it to 9 million, you have 6.8 million of fund balance left, you could support that, if that's what the commission wanted.
Could we, would we be able to add $1 million to each so that we're 9.5 on roads and then 2 million on community?
Yeah, just to leave you with about $5.8 million in fund balance in this, and the budget would support.
Well, can I make that as a motion?
Sure, yeah. And what we'll do is, so we'll add $1 million to streets to make it 9.5. We'll add $1 million to community initiative projects to make it 2, all in the fund year 27.
Okay.
So now we have 3 changes with those 2 changes, and then the recommendation for $50,000 in promotions for both 26 and 27. Those are the 3 changes we have right now on the table. So if the commission wanted to vote, if there's no other changes and the commission wanted to vote, they could vote to approve the budget and recommend the budget to city council with those 3 changes.
I want to add a mail line for next year's meeting.
And you got it, we'll do it.
Everybody bring potluck.
Did you make the motion or you want me to make the motion?
I would prefer the staff would not make the motion.
One of the commissioners other than the chair make the motion.
I would like to make the motion.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor of making the changes to the budget as Chris is now outlining, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Going.
Opposed? All right, 2 things. Number 1, the meeting has to be formally adjourned. I've been told, I think by staff, that I've been too informal about how I adjourn them. So, we're gonna have to take a formal vote on adjourning tonight's session, so. Yeah, so, I'd like a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Any days to that. Late night. And then I will make one more comment, and that is, in anticipation of a long meeting and in anticipation and, the recognized Commissioner Carter's effort, I did bring a dessert for everybody, so there is, you can only run, and people in the back of the room, you're welcome. There's plenty for everybody, so, thank you all for tonight.
Thank you.
Real quick, just officially, but this is Commissioner Feuder's last meeting. I wanted to say, it's Commissioner Feuder.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's
Thanks,
not
everyone.
that hard, every child in